Talk Show. Recorded live.
Hello, everybody. This is Derek Logue from Once Fallen, and Tom Madison from Oregon Action Committee is with me tonight. A lot of people have been asking me about the New York trip, primarily about this documentary called Untouchable, and I thought that there was just so much to discuss with the film that it was just a little bit easier for us to do this with an audio discussion, because we have lots to discuss. There's two parts to our big New York trip. On Tuesday evening, Tom and I went to see Untouchable, the documentary. There's been a lot of hype about it. And on Wednesday, Tom and I conducted a Anti-Registry movement protest in front of the offices of Parents for Megan's Law. So this is a very interesting. I think you guys will find this extremely interesting. Now, Tom, I know you're listening right now. I took notes during this thing, so I don't know how in depth we want to cover everything that happened. There was a lot to discuss about this film, but go ahead and tell everybody your first take. How you feel, what you thought about the movie when you saw it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I was actually pleased to see the movie come out. I didn't really care that it might be a film that would portray the typical way that the subject of sex offenders in media are often portrayed. My view is that any coverage at all is better than no coverage at all. So the fact that the film not only covered the books, Lauren Book and Ron Book in the film. She was the centermost character in the film. But also the director decided that he would include some of us who went to Tallahassee that day, was back there in 2015, and allowed for us to, our movement generally, to communicate some of the typical talking points that we do talk about, that we want to get out there into the media. Of course, our news media typically doesn't cover our viewpoints. Some do, but this is the first movie that has come out that I remember that has anything to do with having somebody from our side talk about the truth about the sex offender registry in a more balanced way. So I was very happy to see that, Derek. And you were in it very briefly. I don't know if they wanted the men who were on the registry to speak in the film. Obviously, they didn't. They wanted I think they wanted the family members, the family members who are the new victims of the sex offender registry laws, their voice made available in the film, along with the other experts, whether Jill Levenson from one of the universities down in Florida, and other legal experts talking about various aspects of citizen rights, or the fact that family members are most likely and most often likely to commit sex crimes, if that should ever happen, not people on the registry, not strangers on the registry down the street from where families live. So it was nice to see that. So I was also happy with the books in the film. I was happy to see Lauren. I was happy to see Ron Book. It may sound strange that I say that, but it was probably a case where they overcovered the books, and especially with Ron Book and his particular personality and his vengeance and mindedness against those on the registry, to me, came across on the film as one of showing this person not as a reasonable man, but as an unreasonable, out of control in some ways, over-the-top persecutor of registrants and registrant families by their connection to registrants, so much so that it made him look evil, maybe slightly evil, some would say, but I would say evil. And the new victims on the block are the registrants and their family members. So I think it played that way. I was happy to see it.
Right. Well, before we get into the actual film itself, of course, I'll take a moment to give my first impressions of the film. I am let down. Quite frankly, I am very let down by the film. I mean, now, don't get me wrong, it's not bad, but it's not I guess if we were to look at it like a football game, it would be positive yardage, but it wouldn't be a big play, in my opinion. Maybe a little run up the middle for a couple yards. The one thing that really concerned me is before the film even started, I ran into the producer, David Feige. I don't know how you pronounce his name, quite frankly. Feige. I'll just call him David. So David and I ran into each other before the film, and he told me that Lauren Bilk was going to have a Q&A after the show. So she's going to be at every one of these Untouchable screenings. I think there's probably one more after this. I could be wrong, or maybe yesterday was the last one. But whatever the case may be, Lauren Bilk was there, and he asked me specifically to be nice and to her because she was, as he put it, skittish as fuck. His words, not mine, so don't shoot the messenger here. And he didn't want me to ruin an opportunity to promote the film, by going after the books. And that kind of ticked me off a little bit that he would say that, especially knowing that after the film, there was nobody on the other side of this issue doing a Q&A, just Lauren. That really bothered me, and I think that will probably bother a lot of other individuals. So anyways, Tom had already taken his seat, so, David had sort of pulled me off to the side and asked me to do this, and it kind of got me a little bit worried. It kind of, that, and the BBC review where David had mentioned that Ron Book had watched the film and he loved it. I feel that they catered to the books way too much. Not just in the film, but after the film. They softballed the books, quite frankly. I don't feel that they turned the heat up on them at all. And David himself also said he wanted to avoid talking solutions to the problem. He just wanted to present the problem as it is and let people make up their own minds. So, of course, we already know that lots of people make up their own minds anyways. But on to the film itself. This is my little chicken scratch. This is just a little rundown of pretty much the entire movie. First, we had an opening montage, your typical news media reports, sexual predators, blah, blah, blah. They introduced, the first person that we really see is a woman by the name of Judy Cornett. Now, Tom, you probably have a vague recollection of Judy Cornett from her presence.
Do I ever? From way back in 2007, Columbus, Ohio, our so-called Raleigh back then.
Later on in that movie, Judy Cornett popped up a couple times in this movie, and actually, I'm sure you probably caught this, Tom, but she did mention that she had been to a sex offender protest before, protesting us, and that was specifically the rally in Columbus back in '07 with her and Absolute Zero United and Bikers Against Child Abuse.
As I recall, she was one of the ones that held up a sign, "Cry Me a River," I think it was.
Yeah, something like that. Later on in the film, some people know this and some people don't. Judy Cornett's a sort of notorious vigilante. She's actually friends with a certain other vigilante that we all know and well, a certain reptile from southern Florida that we shouldn't even have to mention her name. But thankfully, that woman's not on the film. So thank goodness for that one. But Judy Cornett does a lot of harassing. And, of course, in the initial montage of Judy Cornett, she's going around the neighborhood and she stops in the hood somewhere, and there's these black kids, out there playing ball and stuff, these young ones, like preteens or whatever. And she's showing them all the pictures. She's showing all the pictures of all the sex offenders in the neighborhood, and they're sitting there going, "Damn! Hey, I know him. That boy's a rapo," and stuff like that. But interesting thing about Judy Cornett is her son, who had been molested all those years ago and stuff, he's in prison right now for attempted murder from a drug deal gone bad. So he tried to rob somebody selling drugs, and and it went awry, and he tried to kill that person and shot at him or something. So he's serving 25 years right now. So they go from Judy Cornett to a woman by the name of Shauna Baldwin, who is a registered citizen in Arizona. They have her labeled as a predator. She was age 18, had relations with somebody slightly younger than her. So that's probably the one person that, on our side of the fence that is probably going to get by far the most sympathy in the entire film. And she's in there an awful lot. Now she's got 2 children. These laws are passing. She couldn't take her kids to the park. She couldn't get a job to support them, that sort of thing. But they followed her immediately by this other guy by the name of John Cryer. He is somebody who admits to being a pedophile. So they go right from one extreme to the other. And, and he's the one who says in the, in the trailer, those of you who've listened to the trailer, he's the one who says, if you knew what went on in my mind, you would lock me up for the rest of my life. And I really cringe when they put people like that on TV. You know who it reminds me of, Tom? You remember Jake Goldenflame by any chance?
Well, I remember the name from way back when. He kind of dropped out of the scene. He may not even be alive today.
Yeah, he was always the go-to pedophile whenever Oprah Winfrey or somebody wanted to shock the audience, because he would go out there and admit that he had, sexual fantasies about young boys and stuff. But I never really liked Goldenflame that much, and so here's the person. Although he not really a bad guy, but he's going to say the things that people want him to hear. After they show him a couple times, they bring Ron Book back on there, and he's talking about that we should be waterboarded and tortured. That all of us that are on the registry.
I'm kind of glad he said that, though. I mean, it just shows how deeply vengeful this man is. In fact, he's actually unhinged, and I think when our movement generally gets a chance to see the film, I think you'll see this this unhinged Ron Book with his views on vengeance and waterboarding, whatever it is. He wants to torture. He wants to torture registrants for the rest of their lives, and I think that's. I'm glad that he said what he said in the film. I'm glad it showed him as he really is, not this man concerned with public safety and the safety of children. No. His position primarily is to get endless vengeance against former sex offenders, and of course, their families. If those registered families are in the way at the time, that's too bad. If they're hurt, that's too bad. The fact is, he's a monstrously vengeful person, and I'm so happy that he made it onto the film.
Yeah. So, and then after that section, they go to the homeless camp in Miami, the one we're familiar with. And they talk to a registrant by the name of Clyde Newton, and he mentions that the Department of Corrections tells individuals if they cannot find a place to live that they are actually assigned to a homeless camp. So apparently there might be more than one in Miami besides the one that we're aware of. That was what I took away from what they said. So throughout the movie, these are pretty much the main players that you'll see throughout most of the movie is Judy Cornett, the 3 registered citizens that I mentioned, the Book family, and throughout the film, in different places, you'll see some various researchers, people, some we know, some we may not know. I mean, Eric Janus, who wrote the Failure to Protect, that's the book that I read that pretty much inspired me to create oncefallen.com. There was an attorney by the name of Val Jones, or Janus. Then, of course, Jill Levenson was on there. Patty Wellerling was on there a little bit as well. And then... So that, throughout the movie, in various places, they brought out, a handful of statistics, about residency restrictions don't work. Recidivism rates are extremely low. And the one, I was happy to know that as far as the statistics go, they were really good with showing that. That was definitely a plus for the film, in my book.
Jared, to add to what you just said, it became apparent about halfway through the film that which is, by the way, the basis for the sex offender registry laws in our country today, is the fact that facts don't matter. Facts are not part of the vengeance that the books and maybe most of the legislators around the country think about. The registry law is a regulatory law that is an end run around Constitution. It's an end run around facts that get in the way of the persecution against the vengeance. I think that was very clear, both words coming from legislators as well as Ron Book. I think if you watch the film, you come away with realizing that what we all know is that these laws are fact-free persecutions. That's what they are, and the film shows them very nicely.
Yes. Now, after they showed the first round of statistics, they went back to the Julia Tilla Causeway, or as we like to refer to it as bookfill. As a matter of fact, they had some footage of stuff that we didn't even see, and one of the most interesting parts of that, the footage was they had the Welcome to Bookville sign up there. Little known fact that I'm the person that got the people to put that sign up. But it was interesting watching Lauren Book. She had walked up to the sign and she reached out to touch it. It was a little bit taller than she was. I thought that was hilarious for some reason. And then of course, they had more comments from the Book family. Lauren says she had no sympathy for the people living under the bridge. Ron said you lose your rights and you deserve to be treated differently the moment that you commit a sex crime.
Yeah, so what he's basically saying is he approves of the idea that registered sex offenders are second-class citizens. He's basically confirming that that's okay. Our society can allow for a second-class citizenry, and isn't that interesting that it so nicely parallels the events of the 1930s in Europe, especially in Germany at that time. There were second-class citizens there, too.
Exactly. Then they go to Patty Werling. She discusses how the term sex offender is broadly defined. She said a pretty good line in the film, and I'm sure that you agree it was a good thing that she said, Tom. She said something along the lines that the registry was hijacked and went down another path.
Yes, and she did say that, and that is so true. It was intended at the very beginning to be in the hands of police only. It was supposed to be a police tool to check in on people that might be committing crimes of some sort, although I'm not sure the usefulness even at that level. But with Megan's Law that came out federally in 1996, made it public, the whole idea was that the people, the parents in this land, can do their own policing by having a list of known sexual offenders, and once they memorize the pictures and addresses, they can protect their kids. Of course, we know that's all rather a bunch of folly, because the fact is, of course, most crimes are in the family, as we all know. So, but she did say that it did go down the wrong path, and that wrong path is that of again, I use the word persecution. It's a vengeance against people that have already paid their debt. It's a violation of the Fifth Amendment, double jeopardy, all the rest of it. It's perfect. I love the film that it tended to bring out the personality of those who are vengeful against former offenders.
Yes, and then, the next scene after that, they went back to Shauna, and she had discussed how much she had paid her time being on probation. She had to do polygraphs, special sex offender treatment on top of the regular probation fees, and she had paid to date over $35,000, and that's a huge amount of money.
Another angle I thought was important in the film was they showed the Book's, or at least Ron Book's home. Lives in a very posh neighborhood, a big pond in back of his home, a big, a very fancy, almost mansion. You could describe it as a mansion, and it exudes wealth and prosperity and so forth. And here, this man who has so much wealth and power, and I think he admitted that, or it's someone in the film mentioned that he does control the legislature. He's got a lot of power, a lot of money. He's got a lot of influence. and those legislators and even the governor will not get out of line, out of his control. So he knows he has that control, and he comes across as being this arrogant individual, but again, a wealthy, vengeful individual who goes after the people who live under bridges, who live in homeless camps in the way out areas of industrial areas near railroad tracks and off areas of the freeway and so forth, living in abject poverty, without toilets, without running water, other basic necessities. Great contrast, and again, it'll pique your interest to see this contrast, and I hope that the rest of America can see it as well.
It made me sick, quite frankly, looking at that, watching him get his shoes shined and eating steak tartare at a fancy schmancy restaurant, and then going from that to, seeing a guy, basically having to live out of a tent and, and eating, cold soup out of a can or whatever, and stuff. But since we're back on the subject of the books, this is the part after that part that we just mentioned about Shauna. That's when they finally get to the part about the rally, and they were showing the day before the rally where Ron and Lauren are discussing that, as they put it, a group of pedophiles and predators were coming to protest them tomorrow, and they just could not believe that we had the audacity to do such a thing. And so
you're referring to the April 2015 protest there in Tallahassee, Florida.
Yep, our wonderful ARM rally last year. And, we were in it, but, of course, they really downplayed our role in it. They focused more on the books than they did on us. They showed the rally very briefly. I think they gave, War about 10 seconds of airtime, and then they talked to two other women who were there who had protested with us, and then they showed some of us holding our signs, in contrast to the book family, and then their speeches that they gave, and they really didn't come back to us that much. It was very brief. Our presence in the film is extremely brief. I was on there for a few seconds. You can hear the only words you'll hear from me is when you'll hear me say very briefly, here they come, this is the moment we've been waiting for. And then you see us coming down the street with our signs, and then them coming up and stuff, and you see the police, that big long line of law enforcement. Mm-hmm. Those of you who've seen our film from last year already know how everything went down, so we don't really have to go, discuss that too much. And, from there, I think the part of the film after that really put most of the focus on the books. You see Ron Book watching freaking Law and Order SVU, like he was watching an episode of WWE SmackDown or something, cheering for the police. I love it when they get the bad guys.
Well, they also did us a favor by having one of the representatives from Women Against the Registry, Vicki Henry, was in it, and I think the reason they used her interview, Derek, was because in the view of the producer, the director, I'm thinking because they wanted a moderated kind of a spokesperson for our side of it, a family member, very concerned about the registry as a whole and how they affect family members. I don't think they were ready for our stronger messages. You and I are, at least I am, I know you are too, militant-minded, outspoken, bold, and so forth. And I wonder, Derek, if they did a calculation saying to themselves, well, what they say is important, that Derek guy, that Tom guy, but it's the audiences out there aren't ready for those bold, registered citizens, these militant citizens, and their words, maybe too early for that. So I think they went for a more moderated, calm, a family member as the next step in introducing to the public the truth about these laws.
I was really going to wait until after I went over the movie to talk about that part, but since you brought it up, I may as well just clear the air on this, because I know that you're a little bit more moderate, a little bit more tempered at this than I am. I was downright pissed. that they pulled that crap on me. And I asked David what the hell was up with that, and he said that that the message of me and Tom and the other men that were out there was quote unquote too harsh, and that just pissed me off because we had to sit there and we had to listen to Ron Book talking about waterboarding us, torturing us, calling us pedophiles and predators, and that we get, that we lose our rights and we deserve to be treated like shit. And, we don't deserve to have a normal life and stuff. And yet our message, don't criticize the books. Be nice with Lauren because she's skittish. And not even having anybody opposing her during the Q&A session. To me, that's all a load of horse shit. It's quite frankly, that's what it is. It was a steaming pile of crap. And, to me, what it tells me, don't tell me you're going to sit there and avoid taking sides. You sound like Pontius Pilate, David. You sounded like Pontius Pilate, I'm going to wash my hands of this whole thing, but go ahead and flog them while you're at it, And that's what that's exactly how I felt after this. That part, that's probably the part that angers me the most about this whole thing. And yes, I'll talk about the Q&A here after we go go over the rest of this film. I'm gonna try to speed this up a little bit, because I know people want to know a little bit more about the film. We see a lot about Ron a little bit more. I mean, you see a lot more of him in the second half of the film. They do go back to some of the other people. They discussed an individual who went back to prison for 4 years because he was 8 minutes late to to his therapy session or something like that. They go into a montage about Florida's little scorched earth policy. You hear some of the typical political BS that you're used to hearing. They were talking about the park bans, and they went back to Shauna, who took her kids to the park for the last time, which that was kind of sad. Then they went back to the Ron Book, talking more stuff about pedophiles. They had a very short discussion about treatment. They had a short discussion about the frightening and high term that we heard, that was from the U.S. Supreme Court in Smith versus Doe.
What's kind of interesting about what you just said regarding Ron Book is that whenever he was on screen talking about registered sex offenders, he used the word pedophile more often than any other term, either predator or pedophile. He seems to have an extremely limited and maybe purposely limited views on registrants, regardless of the spectrum that covers everything from 30% of those on the registry being teen consensual sex with boyfriends and so forth. He seems to ignore that part of it. He likes to demean registrants in the best way he can, is to use these two P words, predator and pedophile, relentlessly without any respect for others on the list.
Right, and there's the video starts winding down at this point because you're getting to the end of it. The last few moments are pretty much, you're trying to wrap things up. So they go back to Judy Cornett, and now they're discussing, and I'm actually shocked that they even bothered to bring this up, but they discussed that, what I mentioned earlier about Judy Cornett's son getting arrested for attempted murder, and now she's having to deal with a lot of the same issues that we have, with people sort of, looking down on her because her son's now a convicted criminal. And so she claims that her message is a lot more tempered. Now, maybe not. The funny thing about it is I've actually had a discussion with this woman. So I've never really seen her as on the level as Valerie Parkhurst, but I still don't trust her as far as I can throw her. And maybe this experience with her son going to prison, possibly did, sort of change her a little bit. They talked about, Patty Wetterling. They showed her again, at a closing statement from her. They talked about towards the end of the movie, Clyde, the guy from the homeless camp, actually reunited with his victim. His victim was a family member, and they've reconciled. let's see, they showed Shauna trying to meet her state legislatures there in Arizona to try to change the laws there. But and then of course the film ends with more discussion from the books. They showed a lot of film, a lot of home footage from the books of Lauren in her younger years and whatnot, to sort of end it out. And unfortunately, it begins with the books and ends with the books, and that's pretty much the entire. That's the movie in a nutshell right there. I've covered pretty much every major frame in it. So
let me ask you this, Derek. In terms of rating the movie, and I'm going to use a scale of 0 and through 9. Keep it single-digit numbers, 0 through 9. 9 being absolutely brilliant, and 0 is just worth nothing. What number would you assign to the film?
I'd put it right down the middle. I would give it a 4.
I think on that scale, 5 would be the exact middle. So let's say a 5 then, right?
Yeah, so it'd be 5. Well, it says you started with 0, but that's why I went 4, because 0, 1, 2, 3, 4.
My math,
but 5 or 4. The thing about it is, I feel like if this was, if we were looking at a scale, the scale would have been tipped in the direction of the books, but ever so slightly. And the biggest problem that I have with the film is, like I stated earlier, maybe I did. If I haven't completely stated it, I'm going to state it once again, is that the film, you have Ron Book in the crosshairs, but you failed to pull the trigger. You didn't turn the heat up on them one bit. You sort of kept the Book family immune from any real criticism. None of the criticisms were even really directed at Ron Book throughout the movie, even when we had discussions about the law that is named after Lauren. The 2,500-foot residency restriction is named after Lauren Book. They're in Miami-Dade County, and they softballed the books.
What you are nailing it with respect to Ron Book. Again, I've already said talked about his vicious vengeance against all registrants on the sex offender registry, and if the director were to somehow find it in a to have a balanced view of that vengeance with, let's say, a Vicki Henry of Women Against the Registry being in the middle of this whole thing as a moderate type of opinion, well, the counterbalance would have been what Derek had to say, what Tom Madison, had to say, things that were not included in the movie. That would have been a counterbalance to the wickedly vengeful Ron Book comments. I was disappointed in that respect. That's the only glaring thing or at least the main one that pops out of me is this: it tended to be one-sided and not represent the militant registrant that Derek Logue is, that Tom Madison is. That would have shown the world there is another side of this thing. It's not just the moderate family member, such as Vicki Henry, who have good things to say, but it did not include the militancy that I think is going to be a growing factor in the years to come. It's too bad that was left out of the film.
Well, they skimmed over the rally and tally, and in doing so, they didn't really explain what it was about. They didn't really, somebody who looks at it is just going to, it's just window dressing, just like much of the other montages about the books. Really the focus would be on, would kind of go back and forth between Ron Book and the 3 registered citizens that are in the film, and everything else is just, window dressing. That's sort of how it comes out. But of course, it's more favorable to the books because, we're painting Lauren as a sympathetic figure. Ron maybe not so much. He's a douchebag, king douchebag, and everybody knows it. And he's a big loudmouth piece of crap, and everything. The one thing I noticed that Ron Book wasn't at the filming. Lauren Book was, and of course, this is the thing I think that's probably angered a few people realizing this is that Lauren Book, was given a Q&A, but nobody else was invited to do a Q&A, just Lauren. And everybody else was softballing her, and I honestly don't think that they even intended to call me to ask a question. I think they were going to try to blow me over, but I think what happened was David had gotten somebody else to come out there, and maybe this person didn't realize who he was. It was a dark it was a kind of a dark theater. They got the lights kind of dimmed up and everything. So he pointed me out, and I got to stand up, and I asked Lauren Book. I said, how in the hell can you sit there and talk about how registered citizens don't deserve second chances when your father is a convicted criminal and he's allowed to have a second chance and continue doing the very work in which he was convicted of? And her only response to it was like, well, at least my daddy didn't molest anybody. All he did was, all he was convicted of was illegal campaign contributions, and that's all I got to say about that. And that's pretty much all she said. And then she was back on to everybody else kissing her rump, oh, she's running for legislature, yay, her, Lauren, you're my hero. I could have sworn that, most of the audience members were in reserved seats, so I'm pretty damn sure that most of the audience members were Lauren Book fans. That Lauren probably paid a lot of these people to attend it. That's just my opinion, but Tom and I, we said
I hadn't thought about that. That does make sense. It seems it could have been that way. Absolutely.
Well, think about how far back you had to sit because they had all those reserved seats. It was like 20 rows of reserved seats. I mean, it wasn't the biggest theater in the world, mind you, but but it was almost at the back. I mean, you're way up there in the nosebleeds.
Remember, as you know well, Derek, that Lauren is, of course, a candidate for state senate out her area there in Florida, so I'm sure a lot of these were maybe perhaps campaign helpers in that effort to get elected.
Well, maybe maybe someday we'll see. I'll go back and look at the leadership for Broward. I can find their information online, and maybe we'll see how much of that $765,000 went towards this venture. So, my take is that, I went away disappointed. I felt like they catered to the books too much. It wasn't tempered by the other side. Here's a thought, Derek. Perhaps, now I'm asking this as maybe a place to start an investigation. I mean, did Ron Book make any financial contribution towards the getting the film produced? It's a pretty good question. I mean, it seems to me that they cater to the books a little too much. If you really truly wanted to be the objective, you wouldn't be trying to get approval from one side of the issue over the other. Obviously, he took sides because Ron Book got his screening. Most of you people aren't going to be able to see it for possibly months, unless you made it to New York to go to the Tribeca Film Festival.
I know that putting together a documentary like this they're all expensive, and Mr. Book is known for his being a wealthy millionaire, and who knows what those monies might ultimately be directed towards in the pursuit of getting his daughter elected to office.
Yeah. So my final verdict is this: as far as this film, as far as the film itself, not the external parts that from the filming at the Tribeca Festival notwithstanding, we gave it. I give it a 4.5 or middle ground, right down the middle. Little extra slice on the. It seems like a little extra slice on the book side. I would tell people to still. I gave you a bad scale earlier. I said 0 to 9, but let's make this a 1 through 9 with 5 being in the exact middle. Now, tell me what your scoring is. How about a 4 point? Can I get to a 4.99999? Because I mean, it's just it's like one of those close football games where where your team loses on the final play of the game and you're crushed and you're heartbroken. That's kind of how I come away feeling. I feel disappointed. I feel like it could have been so much if they had turned the heat up on a little. If they turned the heat up on the books. It's not so much about, how they treated the rally and tally, but if they had turned the heat up on the books a little bit, if they had discussed things like Ron Book's connection to the Geo Group, for example, which is something that somebody confronted David about after the show, which I was lucky enough to hear what the person had to say, or if they discussed Ron Book's criminal past and had Ron Book have to answer some of this stuff, then perhaps maybe I could have pushed it up a little bit higher. I can't tell people not to watch it, but ultimately I felt like it was a letdown. Maybe the namby-pamby types might like it because it's such a tempered message, but it's too weak sauce for my liking.
I think our movement's going to like it. I think I'm going to score it a 6, and the reason I'm scoring a 6 is because it made Ron Book look like a complete jerk. And I love that. And I think the rest of the community will give it a 6 or higher maybe, only for that reason. I mean, there's certainly a lot of, people like Vicki Henry gave a very moderate, good, report as a family member. I liked what she had to say. I liked what the Janus person, the Professor Janus had to say about, the various sociological statistics, legal statistics, the psychological aspects coming from, and group psychology aspects coming from Jill Levenson, Dr. Jill Levenson. So I give it a 6, but mainly, and I love to say it again, is that it made Mr. Ron Book like a complete ass. I mean, an arrogant, vengeful ass, and I love that. And I think whatever part he thought he would have in the movie and however it might play towards him, the fact is I think it hurt him.
Yeah, you know what? I think that, now, off the, not about the film, but about the Q&A itself, I think that the way that Lauren Book reacted to me pretty much shows that, that she is, she can be rattled. She likes to put on this little sweet little facade, play the little airheaded blonde bimbo that she is. But, she's got some claws to her, and it kind of came out when I made my little comment to her, and she came back with the snarky little remark. She's a vicious little brat. And, everybody else sees that little sweet side of her, but, I think that the real reason why that she's being protected so much is because because she's playing this persona of being this little sweet, innocent type, and the reality is she's, the rotten apple does not fall too far from the rotten tree here. She's pretty much Ron Book in a skirt.
Exactly. Well, I'm sure as a future state senator there in Florida, with her father already a heavy-duty lobbyist, and now with his daughter as a Senate legislator, I think the future for lobbying on the part of Ron Book will double or triple. Now there's daughters in there to introduce bills because now she can do so, and so they're going to get into high gear. So Florida, as mentioned in the movie, as by one of the state representatives in the film, who mentioned that it could be, that the sex offender registry laws and other laws regarding sex offenders in Florida can be a template for other states to adopt. And that gave me a chill up my spine, because I think how vicious it is today in Florida, one of the worst states imaginable to be a registered sex offender and have to live in that state. But with Ron Book and his daughter as a team now, with one of them, of course, in the Senate, I think the hell that Florida is today is going to double as a hell in the near future, with more draconian sex offender laws to come.
Well, I think we've covered this movie about as well as we can. We leave it up to individuals. Obviously, you will watch it. Some of it you'll like, some of it maybe you won't like. I would, even though I kind of scored it a little bit lower than what I probably would have if a few things have been tweaked. It's still probably something that many of you who are listening to this might still want to see. When it does become available, I don't expect me to add it to my list of recommended viewing, but I will make a link available if I do get any information on when it's available for regular public viewing. Before we get into the second half, Tom, what I was thinking is, to make it a little bit easier, so I might want to break this down into two parts.
Sure.
When I do the YouTube conversion this weekend, I say we do about 30 seconds of total silence.
Absolutely.
Because when I look at all right,